Zephin Blacksburg here, and I'm joined by Kate Erickson for the Life Rescripted Virtual Summit. And Kate is a creator, engager, and implementer over at Entrepreneur on Fire, a 7-day-a-week podcast that interviews today's most inspiring and successful entrepreneurs. She is also the host of Kate's Take, the Entrepreneur on Fire audio blog, and author of The Fire Path, a beginner's guide to growing your online business. Kate is passionate about helping entrepreneurs create freedom in their business and life through developing systems and processes that can help their business scale and grow. And I was fortunate enough to hang out with Kate last week at the Podcast Movement Conference, so it's so great to speak to you again. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Zephin? Thanks so much for having me on. And yeah, that was so awesome to get to hang in person together. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day. I know it's a lot to like come back from a big event and got to answer everybody's emails and stuff like that. So, I'm grateful to you for spending some time. One of the things that I got to do at that conference was hear you talk, which was awesome. And I got introduced to your podcast, which I hadn't heard of before, and I listened to the whole ride home. And one of the big things that you talk about is processes. So many people just dive right into things like, I want to be a business owner, or I want to do this, I want to do that. And they don't step back first and say, okay, like, how do I do this the most efficiently so I'm not wasting my time or even more important, anyone else's time when you do it? So I'd be curious to hear a little bit about, how you set up systems and what types of benefits we could get from doing this.
Yeah, so I'm so into systems and processes. Thank you for being there at my talk at Podcast Movement. Really appreciate your support there. And, it's one of those things where when I start talking about it and thinking about it, I get so fired up about it because John and I have been able to literally create freedom for ourselves through setting up systems and processes in our business. And I know it's not something that comes naturally to a lot of entrepreneurs just because as entrepreneurs, we're very creative people. We like thinking big. We like thinking ahead. And that's all awesome. We need that for sure. But what I talked about in my presentation some is that I see entrepreneurs and podcasters and bloggers start their business and they have these big goals and these great ideas. But the problem is they don't have the systems and processes in place to help get them there. And the reason it's so important is because without systems and processes, we're constantly recreating the wheel. We're constantly starting over at square one every single time we go to do something in our business. So what I'm really passionate about helping others do is create those systems and processes so that they're becoming more efficient with their time, so that they are able to create the same freedom that, John and I are experiencing now that's helping us grow and scale our business, whether or not we're physically in front of a computer or, actively talking to somebody on the phone. So really, what I do at the very base level to make this happen and what I like to teach others is just the very first step of taking inventory of what it is that you work on in your business. Because until we have a good idea of all the things that we're doing that help our business run, we're going to have a really hard time creating systems and processes to make it more efficient. And I think that's where a lot of people might get hung up is they're like, yeah, I want to create systems and processes. This sounds awesome, but it's overwhelming, right? You're like, okay, creating systems and processes for my business, like, what does that mean? And like, where do I start? And so taking inventory is that very first step. Basically, is that you do in your business that actually helps it run.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this also applies as well to figuring out where the time in your day is going, because so many people are like, oh, I don't have time in the day. And it's like, well, if you actually step back and look at like, how much time are you spending on Facebook? How much time are you spending, answering emails or doing these things? Then you really start to realize, where's your starting point, your foundation to get going. And you probably realize that you're wasting a lot of time on stuff you don't have to.
Absolutely. And actually a tool that I love for this is called Rescue Time, and it runs in the background of your computer and it will tell you where you're spending your time. So it's actually a really great tool to have as you're setting that baseline and as you're maybe, spending 3, 4, 5 days just with a sheet of paper next to you and tracking everything that you do in a day, which is what's really going to help you like take that inventory to be able to look back and say, okay, wow, it looks like I, engage with my community every single day. Like, how might I find efficiencies in doing that Or it looks like, I was in my email inbox a lot, according to me, like keeping track of my tasks. So how can I make that more efficient? And rescue time is very helpful with that because a lot of us probably don't realize what it is that we're actually spending our time on. And when you go into rescue time, it will tell you exactly where you've been spending your time.
Very cool. So I could definitely see myself using that just to see where I'm at. I mean, I feel productive, but then again, at the same time, like I don't really know where all the time goes. I'll get up at 8 in the morning and I might still be doing stuff at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And it's like, all right, well, the whole day just went by. So
Yeah.
what comes up after you figure out, like here's my list of the like 1,000 things on my plate. Obviously, like I might feel a little overwhelmed at that point because it's like, oh my God, like this is all the things I'm doing. Where do we go from there once we have a better clue of what all has to, happen?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on really where you're at in your business. Like if you're working up to actually launching your business, then of course you have hopefully a priority in the process. So, if you have to have your website launched before you're able to, start growing your audience, then getting to your website launch is obviously a priority for you. So it might be prioritizing bigger tasks like that are leading up to like a one-time event, like the launch of your website or like the launch of your podcast. Or it could be that you find after sitting down and looking at all the things that you do on a repetitive basis, like where can I start saving myself the most time? And really the answer to that is in the things that you're doing over and over and over and over again. So whether you're working towards like a big launch and you might take out like how can I most efficiently get to my website launch, or whether you're already rocking and rolling with your business and you're just looking to save yourself the most time, when you look at that list of everything that it is that you're working on, you can start to see, okay, well, podcasting is a huge part of my business. And I really struggle every time I go to record my podcast and I feel like I'm starting from square one every time I do it, then actually digging into creating a process around your podcasting would be like a good place for you to start. So it really just depends on what it is that you're doing most, what it is that you're doing most repetitively, and where you feel like you're struggling most when it comes to, gosh, I'm like not even really looking forward to this because I feel like it's going to be such a job for me. Those are the types of things that we can turn into something fun, which is the reason why we started them in the first place, right? Once we create a process or a system around them, they're going to become fun again because you're not going to be recreating the wheel anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know that a routine, really gives us a good calendar of, how stuff can happen. And obviously, there's a lot of things outside of that routine that we can't quite expect. So I'm curious to hear from you, like, what if I have a hole in my tire and have to get a new tire on my car, things like that, where it's like, what can you do when life kind of throws you a curveball and it's like, man, I was supposed to spend the next 3 hours working on this website or this podcast, and now I have to go take care of this thing. How do you kind of go back in and reorganize and restructure so that, you can take care of the emergency at hand and still get everything done?
Yeah, it's definitely always a struggle and balances. But you have to be constantly asking yourself, like, is this really a priority? There are a lot of quote unquote emergencies that we give ourselves throughout the day that if we really take a step back ourselves, like, does this have to happen now? If the answer is yes, it has to happen right now. I mean, you've got to be able to roll with the punches. You've got to be able to pivot and correct course as an entrepreneur. It's a great skill to have as an entrepreneur. So happening and you do have to kind of set aside maybe a 3 hour time block that you were supposed to be using for something else, it's just important that you recognize you're going to have to make up that 3 hours someplace else. Not going out to the movies the next night, or maybe it's, waking up an hour earlier the next day so that you can really get a jump start on that project. We're constantly going to be having those balances effect, but we just have to figure out how to, just slightly tweak our schedule to still get in what we say is important and what we say matters to our business. it might just be that you launch your website a week later. It happens. It happens to the best of us. None of us are perfect. And, to that point, nor should we be striving for perfection. If you have to launch your website without a complete about page, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and I totally get that. So it kind of goes back to that whole like, looking at your priorities, take care of the emergency, and then, you just kind of reshuffle and get right back into the routine as quickly as possible. That way, it doesn't throw you off course so much. Maybe 1 or 2 days got moved around, but at the end of the day, that's not a big deal. And every now and then, if you've got to like pick up some extra time on the weekend to do stuff, I'm sure, it's probably more worthwhile so that you can keep that routine that you've created for yourself. Um,
Absolutely.
so I know that you actually shared with me a pretty cool tool that during your talk that allows you to automate some cool stuff. I think on like social media and a couple other platforms. It was the IFTTT. Was that it?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so maybe share with everybody like what that is and what they can do with it.
Sure. It's one of the many platforms out there that help you automate a lot of what it is that you're pushing out. So it's basically an online presence related tool where IFTTT stands for if this, then that. So basically, what you're doing is you're going in and they call them recipes, I believe. You're creating recipes for your content. So, as a quick example, if I'm a blogger, I'm going to create a blog post. And then, of course, I not only want that with other people, but I'm even going to for myself to create a or something like that. So if I go into IFTTT and I have all this set up, I can tell IFTTT. Did I say too many T's?
IFTTT. I think it's three
IFTTT.
T's.
Yeah. I can say whenever I publish a blog post, I want to share it to Facebook. I want to share it to Twitter. I want to email my list about it. So you set up these recipes so that you're really automating that process so that it's not like, okay, every time I create a blog post, now I have to go share it on Facebook. Now I have to go share it on Twitter. Now I have to go email my list. If this, then that is exactly what it sounds. If I publish a blog post, then I want you to do this. And it automates that entire process for you. And you can do it with, I mean, all the integrations that they have on there is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, integrations with email clients, with social media platforms, with a payment processors, with all different kinds of stuff. So it's definitely a cool tool to help you with.
Whoops, I think it might have cut out there for a second. I might have to make a couple edits on this guy.
Oh, are we good?
Yeah, yeah, I think it cut out for a minute though, but I'll make a couple edits. We'll be okay.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So IFTTT, super cool tool that basically automates, social media stuff, some email things, some postings. Now tell me about like, I have all these things I have to do, just jumping back to the whole like building this routine out. How do I figure out when certain things should happen? Like obviously some of them are prioritized, but other times, should I be working on something for 20 minutes and then go to the next thing? Should I be spending 3 hours on one thing in one day? How should that week, be scheduled out?
Yeah, what I love to do with my time is theme it. And when you theme your days or theme time blocks, you're really giving yourself an advantage in terms of time and efficiency. Because if you block off a period of time to work on a specific genre of tasks, for example, writing or podcasting or videos, then you're taking out any type of context switching that you might have to do. So, what I love about theming my days is that I don't have to jump from a writing task to a podcasting task to a video task to a community task. Because every time I do that, every time I context switch, I'm wasting time. So, Mondays, I have it set up to where that is my writing day. On Mondays, I'm going to write blog posts, I'm going to create email campaigns, anything that has to do with writing that I need to get done that week to accomplish my goals and achieve what I want to accomplish that week. is going to happen. If it has to do with writing, it's going to happen on Monday. On Tuesday is my podcasting day. Wednesday is my webinar day. So you can kind of see, even if you do this with time blocks or entire days, you're really going to be saving yourself a ton of time from having to shift gears completely to, okay, I was just writing, but now I need to get into the recording mode. So it's a really great way to batch stuff. And I think that, back to the very first step of kind of taking inventory and writing out everything that it is that you do in a day, any given week, you'll start to see where you could create those types of categories where a lot of writing stuff might fit into a category, a lot of recording stuff might fit into a category. Even, business building or, client acquisition, depending on what type of business you have, that might be a theme for you. So it's really about figuring out those repetitive things and how you can sort of like batch them together almost. And so theming has been huge for me. Have you done this at all?
Yeah, so I tend to put my podcast recordings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And for me, I've themed Tuesdays and Thursdays my podcast days because I have an office that I work out of, but most of my online recordings happen in my home because I can control the sound a little bit better. And my office is in a co-working space, so I can't always tell everybody to be quiet that's around me. So it's much easier when I can do, some of this stuff from home. The other thing is that I have kind of made a promise to myself that I go to my rowing practices on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and it's much easier to drive to our boathouse from my house than from the office. So if I just, make it so that Tuesday and Thursdays are my days home to work, it works out much better for me. And, I'm kind of working on all of my stuff on that day, within that sort of mindset, because I'm thinking about the same thing throughout the day.
Yeah, I love that. See, you're being so strategic, and it doesn't have to always be with business related tasks. It could be with, the things that are important to you outside of your business, like being active, working out, getting outside, going for a walk, doing a gym workout, whatever it may be. You can still be efficient in those types of things. So I love that you are kind of thinking ahead about when that would be most efficient in your schedule to get it done.
Yeah, and that was also part of a money saving thing to me actually too, was because when I'm at my office, in order to get from my office to the boathouse, it's like an $8 toll for this tunnel that
Ah,
goes under the harbor. And so to pay $8 three times a week that I do go down to the boathouse, that's $24 a week. And over the course of a month, that's an additional $100 back in my pocket by not having to take that method of transportation. So for
yeah.
me, that's an additional over $1,000 a year that I save just from deciding to theme those 2 days around what else is going on.
Yeah. Great. That's great.
Yeah, so we've themed these days, we've got some processes set in place. Is there anything else that we should be looking into that helps us just stay focused throughout the day? Because I know that, we're in a very ADD world. It's, our phones are constantly going off, whether it's notifications from Facebook, emails coming in, people calling us. How do we kind of shut out the distractions without like missing the emergency phone calls coming in and make sure that we can really get through that day that we planned?
Yeah. I mean, well, first it starts with actually planning that day, to your point. I think a lot of people sit down at their computer and then they say like, all right, I got an open day, like clean slate. I can really work on anything I want to today. And that's probably the worst thing that you could do. You really want to plan first sit down on your computer wondering what it is that you're going to work on. A really good exercise or habit to get into for this is either on like a Sunday night at the beginning of the week, or maybe even each night before you shut down for the night. Really think about what you want to accomplish the next day and actually write what you want to on this day, week. Like, what is it that you want to accomplish? Do you have, two three podcast episodes that you need to release and a newsletter that you need to send out? If so, when are you at? And like put that for yourself. That's get in the headspace of this, and I believe she learned it from one of her mentors. Is not schedule it. Once you're able to get in that headspace of like, this is on my schedule, that means I'm going to make it happen, you can start to really plan out your days for success in that way. And, going back to like the systems and processes and taking inventory, theming your days, figuring out your priorities and how you're going to like shift things around, actually having like the steps written out for what it is that you're going to do is really helpful, not only in kind of judging like how much time you might need for it, which, you talked about a little bit before. If you have something that you're going to work on that takes you 4 steps to accomplish versus something that takes you, 12 steps to accomplish, maybe you want to tackle that 12-step project first. Bigger in the morning or whatever it might be, like eat that frog, go ahead and tackle the big thing that you want to accomplish. And then you can set the rest of your day up knowing that, maybe you won't be as focused or as motivated in the afternoon versus the morning. So a couple of things there, but really, writing out those steps is what's going to help you identify like what types of things you might be automating, what types of things you might be able to delegate to somebody else, and then really figuring out how you can schedule it throughout the day or throughout the week to help you with that focus part.
Very cool. And so keeping focused is so important to making sure that the schedule you've set up actually happens and happens effectively. Now, a lot of the schedule stuff happens after we've taken a big leap and, whether it's created a business, started a podcast, started writing a book. So switching gears just a little bit, I'd be curious to hear a little bit about, how you approach the fear of success, of things that could happen, because the process is perfect to have and it really sets you up well. But, for so many people, they don't even get to the process because they get overwhelmed by fear of even starting. So maybe I'm just curious to hear what your experience was like, in starting your podcast and your business, and if any fears came up for you and what that means for you and how you overcame that.
Yeah, well, I will say, I don't think I'd be human if fears didn't come up. I mean, I think it's something that we all experience. And I think that that's important to recognize that if you're feeling scared about something, why will people care? What if this doesn't resonate with people? You get really worried about whether or not what you have to say is good enough or whether or not can actually help other people. And I was feeling that big time when I launched my podcast. I was so scared to put something out there because I thought, well, what if nobody at the same time, feeling like that uncomfortable about something let me know that it was something worth pursuing because, as the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. I've gotten to a point now where I'm really able to push through fear because instead of letting fear hold me back, I let it give me permission. Fear now gives me permission to pursue something because I know it's worth pursuing, because I know that if I'm scared about it and uncomfortable, that means it's worth it and that it's actually going to bring value to people. And, a big goal for me, and I think for all entrepreneurs when we're starting out, it's not about just starting something so that we can own our own business or so, we can brag to our friends and family. That's not what it's about. It's about providing value and helping other people. It's about making an impact. And, if that truly is your goal, which I do believe that is, in the entrepreneurial space, put a message out there to share our voice in order to impact other people, we can't do that if we don't start. And so it's really about not so much like focusing inward on being scared or what if people don't resonate with this? What if it's not good enough? Start focusing outward and start focusing on the fact that you're never going to be able to reach people or make an impact if you don't put your voice out there. So, I could go on for days about like ways to overcome fear and stuff, but I think that I hope people will start to embrace is that, let fear give you permission. Don't let it hold you back. Because what's worst that can happen? If you put something out there and resonate with people or it doesn't resonate with
then then you're one step closer to achieving what does resonate with them. You're one step closer to figuring out what will make an impact. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and I definitely resonate with that because it makes me think back to the time when I was about 16 years old. The very first business I ever ran was a computer repair business, and my dad put an ad in the local paper, and I had people calling me asking for help because, everybody has computer problems. And, being 16, I didn't have a driver's license yet, so my parents always had to drive me to these people's houses to fix their computers, and they would,
Uh,
sit in their living room or whatever while I did my thing. And, ultimately I found out that it wasn't that I was bad at it. It was that that type of thing wasn't going to work, was that I couldn't keep having my parents drive me around everywhere. And so, it kind of goes back to Edison's light bulb, and he didn't find 1,000 ways to fail. He just found 1,000 ways that were not the best way to make a light bulb. And so I think
right.
that's really the best way to look at it is, it's not that you failed. It's not that you should be afraid of failure. It's that you know, really at the end of the day, it just sounds like you're afraid of learning a way not to do something.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. That's an awesome lesson learned for sure.
Yeah, very cool. So you guys have built an extremely successful podcast. You have an amazing book out. I'm actually wearing this is your guys' t-shirt from
Yeah.
something cool that you guys put on. So I'd love for you to share with everyone listening in today. Where's your book? What's it called? Where can people, find out more about you guys? And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, the book that I published is called The Fire Path, and really what it is a beginner's guide to growing your online business. I'm really all about breaking down this step by step. I'm all about actionable advice, not just telling you, why something might be important, but actually how you can implement it in your business. So the Fire Path really walks you along a progression of if you're just starting out, like the very first thing we tackle is mindset, something that we just talked about. And then we go into, what is it like to come up with a viable business idea? What are some of the things that you should be looking for to make sure that the idea that you have is not only something you're passionate about, but something that's actually going to serve an audience. Because without an audience, we can't very well, make something sustainable. And so the Fire Path really walks down the step by step of how to grow an online business. And I love to offer it to anybody who's tuning in completely free. You can go download the PDF. It's also available on Amazon. But the free PDF is, and hopefully you'll be able to link this up to Zephan. It's at eofire.com/TFP book. So I'll go ahead and make sure that you have that link too. But anyone who's interested in checking it out, feel free to head over and download it there. And yeah, everything that we work on, all of our content, our podcast is over at eofire.com.
Very, very cool. And so you guys were a strong influencer for when I started my podcast, and so I just wanted to thank you guys for putting great content out to everyone, and it's been great, running into you at conferences recently, and I hope that we'll get to stay in touch.
Yeah, awesome. Me too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you again inviting me on. I appreciate anyone who's tuning in and watching. Hopefully, this was a helpful session.
Alrighty, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye, Zephan.